Next, we have educator, Ms. Sherri Lucas-Hall. Sherri Lucas-Hall is a Georgia State licensed educator with a Master's of Arts in Teaching Early Childhood Education. She received her educator's OG training in June 2020, and she has been studying the science of reading since January 2019, when she was first introduced to the group, Decoding Dyslexia Georgia. Welcome, Ms. Sherri, and we are ready to hear your magic. Unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry about that. This whole thing is new to me, but I don't know how to follow Miss Risha. Risha, thank you. You did a wonderful job. From the parents' perspective, what I wanted to do and what I always want to do is be able to share the teacher's perspective. And that's where I'm coming from. Recently, I watched an interview on Decoding Dyslexia with Louisa Moats, who is the author of Speech to Print and the developer of Letters PD, and that's Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, which I'm taking now. She said it's our failures that drive us. And when I heard her say that, I thought about it and I realized that it's the failure that happened to me in the classroom that has driven me to do the things that I've been doing lately. When I was in the schoolhouse, I came from a business background. And when I was in the schoolhouse, a lot of time that business background forced me to be real direct, real straight to the point, and I tended to offend people. Often it was my white coworkers that were offended by my directness because I guess it was just a bit too direct. But I'd like to warn everybody now that my intent in this space is to use that directness to get straight to the point of the failure of education. 43 million functionally illiterate Americans make it clear that the time for being quiet or gentle about the huge failure to correctly educate students in reading is over. So I'll start by saying, watch your toes in case I come close, because I'm talking to educators now. I started my letters training in February, about maybe 3 weeks ago. And I can say that letters is the best training hands down for structured literacy. But I know that other people offer the training in science of reading. The Reading League is one organization, and I believe that International Dyslexia Association offers a training instruct in science of reading. But for me, letters has been the best thing to understanding the science of reading and structured literacy for me. I studied the science of reading, like Paula said, since January 2019. But in the time that I've started my letters training in February, about 3 weeks ago, I've learned more in my letters training than I did in the 14 years that I taught and with a Master of Arts in Education. So it's been 2 years since I was sent home from my classroom in December 10, 2018. I still remember the date. For a classroom accident that was the result of me being ill-equipped and ill-prepared as an educator to help struggling readers with dyslexia. I still cry a lot of the times about the students that I know that I failed. But now my tears are more about passion and frustration and a little bit of regret. I don't like regretting much because you can't change a lot of things when you regret. But what I want to repeat is that, you know, you do what you do. You do what you know as an educator. You use the tools that you're taught in the classroom as a teacher prep person. And then when you get in the classroom, you realize those things aren't working. But what a lot of people have been repeating is that you do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, you do better. That's where I am right now. My newly minted degree, taught me that when you go in the classroom, you surround kids with reading materials, you read to them, you make sure that the environment is filled with words and reading and all of that. But what I wasn't told is that some students have a neurological deficit in phonological awareness that requires explicit instruction in phonemic awareness and phonological awareness. And what I'm learning is that a lot of people don't understand that phonemic awareness and phonological awareness are not the same thing. They're two different things. I didn't know that every classroom is likely to have at least one or two students with dyslexia. I just learned that about 3 weeks ago, literally. No amount of reading to a child will ever teach that child how to read on their own. But I lost count of how many parents I told, it's okay, just keep reading to them, they'll catch on. But students don't just catch on, or that catch up without explicit and systematic cumulative instruction and skills that focus on phonemic awareness, phonics, and vocabulary that builds their word recognition and comprehension and fluency. Those are the pillars of literacy. We're just waiting to fail students if we don't give them those skills. And I don't want to fail any more students or their families, because when we fail those students, we fail their families. And that failure is on us. I don't remember how many times or how many families I failed, but I do see the students still, and I remember some students' names. I remember the frustration and the challenging behaviors that come with the failure to read and that academic missing piece that comes with, children that struggle to read. I saw kids in my classroom, and I just saw one of my students last week do this, banging it on his head and hitting like something's wrong with his head. And I had to tell him, don't do that. We're going to be fine. We're going to practice. We're going to do the routines that we need to. I'll teach you how to read. I promise. I remember my own confusion in the classroom when I struggled to teach kids how to read. And no matter how much I prepared for instruction, no matter how many tools I used, no matter how perfect I thought my lesson plans were, it wasn't good enough because I didn't have the knowledge I needed about brain science and how we actually learn to read. I didn't understand that while we learn to talk naturally, reading is not a natural process. No amount of reading, like I said before, no amount of reading will teach a child how to read. The how of reading comes in the details of what you teach. And that's explicit instruction. Expecting a child with limited background knowledge to understand a topic with which they have little to no experience in is putting them at a disadvantage, intentional or unintentional. That's what's been happening in reading education for us, for many students, particularly students of color. We have to specifically teach students the code of reading if we actually want them to learn to read. The simple view of reading says that reading comprehension is a product of word recognition and language comprehension. That's rapidly and accurately retrieving decoded words from memory. And that's essential if we want them to learn how to read. But if we don't teach those things, if we don't teach them about word recognition and teach them about language comprehension, we're setting them up to fail. There is a way to fail ideally in schools now. And Ms. Risha mentioned a lot of this in her experience in education. In pre-K, we say it's just too early. They haven't developed this or that skill. But one thing that a lot of educators and people don't know is that when students struggle to speak, they don't speak early. And when they have fine motor skill development that is slow, that's a warning signal for dyslexia. In kindergarten, we say it's too early to tell if we should, be concerned. I remember saying some of the same things to people. But what we don't know is that as early as kindergarten and first grade, students show signs of difficulty recognizing letters and letter sounds. They can't remember a word from one page to the next page. They have errors that show that they're guessing at words, and they start avoiding reading altogether. They have headaches, they have stomach aches. No kid is supposed to come to school every day saying, I've got a stomach ache or I've got a headache, unless there's really something medically wrong. They're just avoiding the fact that they know they're having to read and they don't know how. By second grade, we say they just need to read more. We tell their families, just read more to your child. But when they're struggling in reading, pushing them to do more of what they know they can't do, it frustrates them, it angers them and their children. It frustrates them and angers them, and it often shatters any confidence that they have. I have a question at this point. How many know that dyslexia is genetic? I had no idea. I did not know until I started studying the science of reading. What I also found out is that the terms dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia can actually be used in IEP documents. I found this out about a week ago when I was reading from the Assistant U.S. Department of Education Secretary Michael Uden in October 2015. He wrote a letter that specifically said that people can use those terms in IEP documents, and a lot of educators won't even use them. Students know that they're reading slow. They don't understand what they're reading or the questions sometimes that are asked of them because of their language comprehension. They do not enjoy reading. But too many people don't understand that there will be no comprehension of words that a student cannot read. I don't care how much time you spend on comprehension. If they do not have the language comprehension to understand the words that they're reading, there will be no comprehension. Remember that simple view of reading. Reading comprehension is a product of word recognition and language comprehension. If they don't have both, they're not going to be reading. So without the necessary skills of orthographic mapping and phonemic awareness, some students will never develop those skills. So they have to be explicitly taught. With that in mind, we need to change the way we prepare teachers and educators to teach reading. Structured literacy is a method of teaching that addresses the foundational reading skills that have to be developed in order for a student to truly read. The science of reading is a body of research and work and science that is over 40 years old. It's an understanding of how our brains process words. It's the understanding that reading is not a natural process and it has to be explicitly taught. We need immediate change in how it's being taught and what educators are learning and understanding about the reading brain. That training should begin as early as the point of somebody chooses education as a path. That means changing how we prepare them and giving them the knowledge and the skills they need about reading and the reading brain and how to explicitly teach children to read. In 2018, with a Master of Arts in Teaching in Early Childhood Education and 10 years in the classroom, I still didn't have any of this knowledge. Now I do, and I'll keep talking about it and keep saying it until every educator has the training and administrators, because there are too many administrators that don't have the training and cannot support their educators in their classrooms if they don't know about the science of reading and how children learn to read. So I want to say that every educator has the tools to help every dyslexic successfully learn how to read when they provide them with the tools and the explicit instruction they need, preferably structured literacy, but that instruction would meet the needs of all students, but especially those that struggle in reading and especially those with dyslexia. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you. Come on. I don't know how y'all feel in the virtual world, but Ms. Risha and Ms. Sherri, thank you, because you have laid the foundation. And I don't know if you all are seeing the chat as you're speaking. I know it's kind of hard to go back and forth, but so much confirmation for both of you. Ms. Sherri, so much confirmation from educators for saying thank you for sharing your experience, because they can resonate. A lot of these educators are saying, yes, that was me. So just thank you. I just had to pause and say thank you. Real quick, for everyone that may have joined a little bit late, or after we started, I should say, because everybody's on time when they arrive. The Q&A box is what we are using for specific questions and answers. The chat is for engagement, but if you have a specific question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom so we don't miss your question. And we're going to keep rolling. Okay. So thank y'all. And